I'm on my hotspot, so just in case if anything happens, I'm sure some yeah, well, just forgive me, but I think I should be all right. All right, cool. Well, I guess maybe we'll just get started now. I think most people are probably here. So welcome everyone. Thank you all so much for coming to another very exciting event. For those of you who haven't been to one of these before, we are AIR UK, standing for Against Institutional Racism, and we're like a fairly new group that set up, led by people of colour, but also supported by a large network of allies, and we're just trying to basically get stuck into anti-racist activism and try and campaign against racism within specifically within UK institutions. We've been doing a series of online events about different sort of themes, and this week's theme is about community activism. So which kind of runs parallel to what our main focus has been so far is sort of political activism and campaigning and lobbying and things like that, but we also wanted to talk about the importance of community activism and sort of supporting projects that work directly within communities. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And yeah, we've got some core team members from the Angry Mob, which is what we call ourselves, who meet up every week and kind of come up with these events. So I think there's 5 of us are going to do a short presentation now, which I'll present my screen in a minute, just to talk a little bit about community activism. And so yeah, the voices that you'll hear and the faces that you'll see are people from our UK, and then we'll go into a panel discussion with our 3 lovely, amazing panelists that we've got here tonight. But I'll introduce them a little bit later on. But yeah, also my name's Ella, for anyone who doesn't know me as well. So I'm going to share my screen. Hold on a minute. Sorry for the delay. Can you guys see my screen right now?
Yeah.
Cool, okay. Let me start from the beginning, actually. All right. Cool. Okay, yeah, so just to explain also, this presentation we kind of did collectively. So yeah, 5 or 6 of us kind of have put together a couple of slides each. So the people who are speaking, they wrote their own slides. So we like to try and do things quite collectively here, which it seems to be working out quite well. So yeah, so here we go. These are Amar's slides, so I'll let you go for it.
Hey guys, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. I'm just going to move my picture because it's in the way of the writing. Okay, there we go. Right, I'm going to take you through what is community activism, or what is a community activist. So it's basically the means by which individuals, groups, or organizations work together to bring about change, and that can be through social, economic, or environmental / cultural practices and policies. Most important point here is that it's just not maybe one person or a group of people, but can also be organizations which help to bring about this change. It has this core idea in the middle of it, where it looks to contribute directly to improve the lives of those who live within that community, which might be different to other types of activism. And therefore it's usually considered to be locally generated and locally focused, with a usual kind of specific geographic location, which will tend to be within the community again. And then it kind of tries to use the power of the community, power of the people, or local group of people, to exert pressure on those who hold institutional power. So that might be like the local MP or the local politician, or any kind of local organization which has a lot of strength and power in the community. But again, it's just trying to bring everyone together in that kind of locality, basically. Next slide. Yeah, thanks. Just to make it clear, it kind of differs from other types of community work. such as community service and community development. So community service is basically helping the community out, but it doesn't seek to change the underlying structures of which that community is run on. That's different from activism, which basically wants to change the way that community is run. So even though they're both helping the community, one's looking to change it fundamentally, the other one is just looking to build on it. And that's the same with community development as well. And another interesting point to note is that the primary commitment and motivation for change within community activism are generated within the community itself. There may be instances where people outside of the community or people who don't live in that certain place may have an interest to do some type of activism there. So that may not be considered as a kind of locally generated, locally motivated communal work. And there should be one more bullet point, I think. Yeah, perfect. So just to give you guys a few examples, I read about the Oakland protest in 2002. So the local police force there gathered a lot more police personnel to carry out stop and search, and that was targeted actually against people of color in America, so mainly the Hispanics and the African Americans. And the local people there in Oakland saw what was going on, did a kind of communal local protest against the increase in police and stop and search, and managed to get that kind of legislation overturned. Again, that's an example of it being locally generated and then having an effect within that locality. And also as well, I'm sure many other protests and movements have started off locally, but another one I read about interestingly was the HIV and AIDS protest, which began about 25 years ago, which started off within certain gay communities mainly within America, but in other countries as well. And that's a good example of one local communal activism, which is kind of generated into a mass movement around the world. But I'm sure there's loads more examples.
So, cool. Thank you so much. These are my slides, so I'm just going to read them out. So this is just a little bit about kind of like community activism and comparing it to political activism. So community activism empowers people by encouraging self-determination. So that would be like, yeah, individuals and communities controlling their own bodies, their own living conditions, and basically determining their own destinies, rather than kind of depending on authorities or the state power, which is obviously tends to be designed to, you know, serve privileged few rather than the many. So that's kind of one advantage of community work, is that it encourages self-determination. Community activism also means that those who are directly affected by a situation can be the ones who sort of decide how to respond to it, and so therefore the change that's created by community activism is on the affected community's own terms rather than the terms of the government or institutions, which is kind of a downside of political activism. Community activism also often proves a more accessible way for people to get involved in sort of creating change. So, for example, there are people who have differing abilities in reading and writing, and also may not have access to certain like technologies and things like that, which would prevent them from being able to do the traditional forms of like political activism, like lobbying MPs or email, like, you know, sending emails and things like that. So a lot of the time community projects offer a way for people to get involved in activism with in a more accessible way. And also, community activism kind of increases sense of belonging and cohesion amongst communities. It's a very kind of social thing. So it helps to connect people and it increases like well-being within those communities. So that's a really big plus. And then political activism. So that involves kind of holding the government accountable for issues of equality and social justice, which obviously it's their job to be responsible for those things in the first place. But as we know, they often kind of fall short in a lot of ways. But yeah, in political activism, we try to hold the government accountable for those things. It can produce kind of tangible, formal, sort of on the record results like new legislation and regulations, which can protect communities and increase also the community sense of importance and pride. So, if the government can be pressured into kind of a new policy which protects a certain community, then that community obviously is going to feel like they're more valued within society, which is a really positive thing. Also, kind of getting involved. Well, for a group or a demographic like us, for us to get involved in political activism, it encourages kind of diversity and representation within the UK political scene, which obviously does tend to usually be saturated by white, middle and upper class people, and men especially. And yeah, and then again, like obviously engagement in political activism by marginalised groups helps to challenge certain stereotypes about those groups who often tend to be demonised or underestimated or kind of patronised and condescended within mainstream politics and media as well. So that's a benefit as well from involving yourself in those in that kind of activism. And then also, yeah, I guess political activism has more, I guess, can be more on a large scale, so it can kind of create mass people power, which obviously can be used to put a lot of pressure on institutions and governments and businesses, especially, and things like that, to improve policies kind of immediately with immediate effect. So yeah, that's a bonus there. But what we wanted to emphasise today is that obviously there are strong cases for both types of activism and organisation, but the two are not mutually exclusive. So in fact, they go hand in hand together, and we'll have the best chance of kind of moving towards a more equal society and destroying racism and things like that if we can simultaneously campaign for policies which encourage decentralisation and put people before profit, but also provide communities with tools and proper conditions to meet their own needs and support themselves, so not to be completely dependent on systems which have so often failed them before. So yeah, we believe that our work must focus on both avenues in order to be the most effective that it can be, and this is why we wanted to kind of highlight the power of community activism today. Cool. So these are Olivia's slides. Olivia is my twin sister, for anyone who doesn't know. So you may.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
Thanks, Amar and Ella. So far, it's been really, really interesting. I actually kind of wish, like, after hearing Amar's slides about what community activism is and yours, Ella, I'm like, oh God, are my examples actually good examples of community activism? But I think that they are. So basically, I've given an example of the Advocacy Academy, which is a transformational that's okay, social justice organising movement for young people from South London who are passionate about creating a more fair, just and equal society. So they have a campus in Brixton, I believe, and so young people coming out of coming out of college, so 18 plus, can apply to become part of this academy, and they prioritise applications from the groups mentioned there. You can read through that, and yeah, basically it just gives people a chance to make change in their local community, and like it gives them the skills and the tools that they need to be able to do that. And I think that it's really cool that they're obviously prioritising people whose voices might usually not be heard as much. So the success story that I wanted to highlight was this group of advocates from the Advocacy Academy. They created this sort of campaign called Legally Black, which you can see pictured here. So they basically made all these, they reimagined the pictures of big blockbuster movies, but with black characters as the main characters, and they actually, they got them put up on like bus stops around Brixton, and it made the national news, which I think is really cool. Back in 2018, and then I actually found this through looking at the Big Issue highlighted 100 like UK based sort of community activists, basically a list of them. I don't know if anyone else saw that, but so this was up there right at the top of that list. So that was a relevant one. And then I think, is the next one on here, El? The other one? Yeah, thanks. So then this isn't really specifically to do with racial equality as much as the last one was, but this is a local one to Brighton and Hove, where I'm from. So this is the Trust for Developing Communities. So they basically bring together individuals who want to help and volunteer in their community, and it kind of like gives them contacts to organizations and charities and businesses who can all work together to create these kind of community projects, basically. So so they've achieved countless positive outcomes for a range of communities across the local area. This maximizes the resources available. Together we are greater than the sum of our parts. So the success story that I just wanted to highlight was this lady Norma, who's here in that picture. That's her receiving her award from the TDC, her Community Champions Award. So she basically is involved with the TDC, but they've sort of like signposted her to groups where she could help. So she lives in Hollingdean, I think, and so she's a member of the Hollingdean Tenants Association, and she started the local knitting group after identifying a group of women that were isolated due to long-term conditions and or were recovering from tobacco/alcohol addiction. So I just thought that was a really nice example of she's just a regular woman who just wanted to do something to help her local community. So she's kind of seen what the issue was with the other women that were isolated, and she's through the TDC she's been able to form this knitting group. So I think that was really cool. There is a video for that, but I think maybe we won't show that, Ella, and then if we have time at the end we can show it, but it's a bit long.
Okay, cool, no worries. All right, moving on to, these are Sonia's slides, I think. Sonia, if you're there.
Yeah, bear with me, I'm not a very good public speaker. Okay.
You're already doing it.
I divided up ways to get involved pretty much in terms of ways to volunteer and sort of miscellaneous. Firstly, I listed some websites that were listed on the government website, and that you can research volunteering opportunities. One that I haven't listed is a website called Neighbourly, which I found quite a lot of good smaller local independent charities listed on that website. You can also contact a charity directly. So if there's a cause that you're interested in particular, whether it's refugees or domestic violence or something. The next bullet point is organising your own fundraising event. So similar to the example that Liv just gave of members of communities who band together to benefit their own community. That can be in terms of bake sales or sponsored runs, those sorts of things. They can be very effective in not only building the community financially, but also the sense of familiarity and love, really. Another one which is could also go in the other category, but it's about volunteering your time, is mentorship. I think it's one thing that a lot of people don't realize they can be a part of. You don't have to necessarily join an organization which provides mentors. You can simply just take someone under your wing that you see needs help, whether it be someone that's queer or someone who may be suffering from homelessness or just loneliness. I think that's a very underrated way, really, to see. It's a better way to actually see the benefits of your labour. Another way is for working on conservation projects. When I say conservation, I'm thinking more so in terms of cleanups and renovating abandoned buildings or council, but it's also about things like building local allotments, local farms, which I know that there's a growing number of them in major cities. I know in London there's a growing number of like urban developments where members of communities are getting together to farm fresh fruit and veg, because there might be food deserts or simply just uneducation really on on like healthy lifestyles. I found 3 main ways that you can take part in conservation projects. One that I listed is called Keep Britain Tidy. That I listed that one just because I think it's the biggest, to be honest. It's nationwide, and they work both within the community and also working to lobby for things like reducing waste, recycling, and getting rid of fly tipping, that sort of thing. Can move on to the next slide.
Oh, wait, sorry, I skipped over one. Wait, okay, here we go. Sorry.
Okay, now this slide is pretty much dealing with the council and the government, and we were debating this yesterday on whether or not how effective this can be, but I think that it's something that a lot of people don't realize, that they have the power to actually take part. A lot of people don't know that they can go to their local council meetings, and that you can go there and you can voice a personal grievance that you have, or if there's an issue in your community with potholes or crime or graffiti, you can also present a petition. So I know it's sort of indirectly related to race, but with the Grenfell Tower, they used petitions, they went to local meetings, obviously didn't work out as well, but it's one of the ways that you can try and get around the blue tape. And another way is to donate. That's really the way that a lot of people think first and foremost, to help local community charities and organizations. You can donate money, possessions, so giving to charity shops or community centres, and they can either give out the possessions or they sell them on further and then use that to raise funds. Or you can give food, which can work in a similar way, or can go to food banks. And the last bullet point is supporting local businesses. I like to sum this in 3 different bullet points as telling your friends and family, just getting the word out there, and following and supporting on social media, and making the effort to patron smaller independent businesses and organizations. So even in terms of donating, the bigger charities, they get a lot of money. So trying to find smaller organizations that work within your neighborhood that can make a more direct, you'll be able to see the benefits of what you've given and what you volunteered there and then when it's a smaller local charity. Those are my sides.
Thank you so much, and you were an excellent public speaker. Okay, sorry, I'm having issues with moving to the different slides. Georgie, she's going to just round us off with some examples of some cool charities.
Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about anti-racist community outreach charities. I live in London, so I've decided to highlight 3 London-based charities. But when I was doing my research, I came across so many amazing charities countrywide. So please do have a quick Google search, see what's in your local area, because there will be a lot, I promise you. Also, I'll drop websites and donations into the chat after, so don't panic if they're not written on the slide. So the first charity I want to talk about is Inquest. It's the only charity that offers specialist support to bereaved people affected by state-related deaths. Research by Inquest revealed that there have been 1,741 deaths in police custody or otherwise following contact with the police in England and Wales since 1990. This research includes deaths which occurred in police custody, through pursuit, road traffic incidents, as well as shootings. The organisation provides expertise, advice and legal aid for inquests for individuals and families who may otherwise not have access to these kind of resources. It's independent of government support and relies entirely on grants and donations. I think if it's clear, you can kind of see in that image on the left, just kind of shows the kind of different tactics that they use to make change. You can, if you don't mind going to the next slide, please, Ella. Thanks. So the second charity is Black Thrive. So as some of you might know, people who are based in London, Lambeth is home to the UK's biggest Black community, with people of African and Caribbean origin disproportionately affected by the area's socio-economic inequality. It goes without saying, really, that there's plenty of evidence suggests that such stresses negatively impact the mental health. Black Thrive is a charity that works to, in their own words, reduce the inequality and injustices experienced by Black people in mental health services in Lambeth. It might be important to note here that Black people are 4 times more likely than their white counterparts to be detained under the Mental Health Act. The charity is a partnership between communities, statutory organisations, volunteers and the private sector. This partnership is supported by a facilitation team. So this team don't provide services, but they support changes within the system by connecting people and organisations. So they create opportunities for the NHS, local council, police and voluntary sector to work with communities, and they also work to make sure change happens within the centre of these institutions and is sustained in the long term. And finally, the last charity I just wanted to highlight was Forefront Project. Thanks, Ella. So some of you here may be familiar with this charity, as there was actually an incident involving one of their members of staff and the police earlier this week. I won't touch on that now, but please do take a look at their website, or I can link the Instagram afterwards and follow the story, because now more than ever they need our support. So the Forefront Project is a member-led youth organisation. They provide support to those directly harmed by experiences with violence in the criminal justice system. The organisation delivers specialist education programmes for legal empowerment and social action in the community. In their words, they work to create transformative justice and healing whilst directly challenging the UK's addiction to criminalisation, policing and prisons. Forefront's currently fundraising to expand its team by hiring a youth activism coordinator and youth support worker so it can support as many people as possible. It's my understanding that they employ support staff who are contactable via a hotline. So young or vulnerable people are encouraged to ring the hotline for support when they come into contact with the police. So this kind of adds an extra layer of security, another pair of eyes to act as a witness if something were to go wrong or anything was to arise. So yeah, I'm gonna drop all links and also their donation links if anyone would like to or can donate today, please do. But apart from that, yeah, I think that's all it from me. Thank you.
Cool, thank you so much. Yeah, thanks again to everyone. I'll sort of stop sharing my screen now. But yeah, thanks to everyone who just spoke, and I hopefully that little presentation just gave everyone a bit of like an idea about the value of community activism, and kind of I found it useful personally to kind of just to hear a bit about like how or to hear examples of like of people who've done it, and how we might be able to kind of like get involved in it personally as well. So yeah, Now we're just going to kind of dive straight into the kind of discussion, like a panel discussion. So I will introduce the three panelists that we have, and then I'll hand over to Ellis, who's just going to kind of ask some questions and kick things off. So, I've got some notes written down here about the panelists, so just bear with me, let me find them. Okay, cool. So we've got Lisa, who's representing Black Community Rising, who are a recently birthed POC community group, tearing down all oppressive systems, currently based in Norwich and Bristol. So do you want to say hi, Lisa?
Yeah, hello everybody. Also, can you let me know if you can hear me properly, because my Zoom sometimes likes to bug with the audio.
No, we can hear you crystal clear.
Well, hello everybody.
Thanks. And then we have Amon from Ixarth. Did I say that right?
You smashed it, yeah.
Okay. I was so nice. So Ixarth are a group which was established in response to gang violence between young people from Asian backgrounds in Slough. So the founders of the organisation believed that young people needed to lead the efforts to resolve this conflict. And over 14 years later, young people are still leading Ixarth's efforts to build peace. And Amon assists with delivering educational training in schools and has been involved with Ixarth for over 12 years. So yeah, and his education delivery focuses on community cohesion, race and identity, anti-racism and conflict resolution. So yeah, hi. It's a pleasure to have you here. And then the last panelist that I need to introduce is Jova. So Jova Reyes, I hope I pronounced your name right, is a Colombian and Chilean musician, poet and radical, and their work explores their experiences as a queer immigrant and looks to build solidarity with the struggle worldwide. So if you don't mind saying hi.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me.
Hey.
Right.
Thank you so much for being here. So yeah, Ellis, I guess if you're there, I will hand over to you now to kind of kick the discussion off.
Hello, yes, I'm here. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
You. Well, Amon, I'll start with you. That's just so vocal. So
go on, hit me.
We've had a bit of a bio already, but could you tell us about the work you do and how it involves community?
How long you got? Okay, there's a lot, so I'll try and be quick. So ultimately, just like Ella had mentioned, we're an organisation based in Slough. We were born out of tensions that were happening between different groups of Asian men generally. I guess at the time it was quite unusual because people were used to blacks and Asians fighting, whites and Asians, whites and blacks, whatever. But this was Asians fighting amongst themselves. And so it was quite an unusual situation. So this was 98, so we've been around for 22 years. We had a gentleman come over from America who is a professor in conflict resolution. Go on, Ella.
No, sorry, I was just clapping for the.
I thought you had your hand up.
Years. No, sorry, I don't really know how to do the reactions, but that was meant to be like a.
Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, we the long and short of it was, in order to fix the problem, it was decided that authorities trying to do it just didn't work. The young people had to lead the way in terms of getting them out of the problems that they were in. So that's how things started. Here we are, like 2020. The group is no longer just predominantly Asian. We've got children from all over the place that come. So we meet once a week. Well, we did prior to lockdown on a Tuesday evening. We do loads of other work. I mean, what I'm saying is the organisation we're in has got lots of offshoots. So we've got young carers who look after these are children that either have a disability or someone within their family that does have one. So we offer an outlet for them. So at the moment, because we can't meet, everything's on Zoom. We've also got Empowered, which is a poetry and spoken word forum. So once a month, we all get together and young people can express themselves through that. There's loads more, but in terms of what I do day to day, myself and Rosa, who's down there, but we go into schools and pretty much, it could be a lot of things. We've got lots of different projects that we go into, but generally a school will call us, and it could be that they've got a very small Black and ethnic community and they need help in terms of how to best service those students. So we've done one recently in Oxfordshire where there's probably about 20, 25, whether it be Black, Asian, children within like a 2,000 population school. And there were things like the school weren't really up to date with things like halal. So they'd cut a ham sandwich and then go and cut a cheese sandwich with the same knife. They weren't, teachers were telling students to go and eat when it was Ramadan. So there was a real big gap in terms of what the school knew. So we'd go in, we'd have consultations with the children and find out what they want, and then put a program together, put that to the teachers, and whether it be going in on staff training days or putting together packages so that they can best serve their communities. So anyway, yeah, there's loads more, but I really don't want to sort of go on because I won't stop. So if you want to introduce the next person, but throughout, Ellis, whatever you want to ask me, feel free.
That was a very good summary.
Don't ask me anything maths related.
Okay, I'll remember that. So Jova, let's move on to you because you're a bit different. You're not working in a singular organisation, you're a bit of a nomad. So if you could tell us a bit about the work you do and how it involves the community.
Sure thing. Well, actually, I did forget to let you all know beforehand that I do work with a couple of organizations, but you are right in the sense that I am a bit of a nomad. But before I moved here, I lived in Chile, and I did a lot of community work there. I volunteered at this LGBT rights foundation called Iguales, and I did activism here and there, just in general. And for those of you who don't know, Chile last year went through an uprising. It's still going on today, and that is very relevant in community work. I'm not currently there, obviously, but I think it is something to look at, but I'll come back to that later. Currently, I am a musician and a poet, and I do mostly focus on arts, but I do work with a couple of organizations, or I'm part of, like, for example, Rainbow Noir, which is a cutie POC organization community group here in Manchester. I also work with Young Identity, which is a poets collective for Greater Manchester as well. And I recently started a collective called Queer Riot, which is for alternative queer arts and music and performance. Because for those of you who don't know, here in Manchester, the queer scene, which is mostly a gay scene, is overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly cis, and overwhelmingly able-bodied. So we want to combat that a little bit. So that's kind of the work that I've been doing, but I am generally very politically active. I always go to protests. I try to be involved in community, even though I'm an immigrant here. So I might not be as well versed in the needs of my local community, but trying to change that.
Thank you. And Lisa, I'd love to hear your perspective on the kind of work you do and how that involves the community.
Yep, so I'm here representing Black Community Rising. So Black Community Rising it's a revolutionary group, it's a revolutionary community group of people of colour, and as Ella said, we're recently birthed. So we formed, I feel like maybe it was maybe 6 weeks ago or 2 months ago max. And I think all of us were just very tired. We were very tired of being in, for example, leftist spaces, and as people of colour just not getting our voices heard. And so as a group and as our group ideology, we do not believe in the state, that the state can provide what we need. We do not believe that the state can liberate us. You know, the state is oppressive. You know, people use this phrase that, you know, the system's broken. That the system is not broken. It's being designed how it was supposed to, you know, work, you know, oppressing us people of color. And so I guess on like anarchist principles and just, you know, left-wing revolutionary principles, we just said, no, we're not going to go and, try and appeal to a state which is, rapacious, which is oppressive. Let's build our own structures, our own initiatives, and let's start from the community and work upwards. And so, as Ella said as well, we're currently based in Norwich and Bristol. And so, what we're trying to do, obviously, there's a lot to chat about, and obviously I need to kind of tighten it up and deliver it in a concise way. But we're new, but we're trying to establish various community initiatives. For example, we don't believe that the education system can be reformed. So what we're doing, and our first workshop is next week, both in Norwich and Bristol, is creating our own education workshops. But whilst it's education, it's also going to be a space where we can give free food to the community, kind of, Black Panther style, and also just chat to the community, hear what they have to say. I think, we want to work as close with our, Black and brown community as we can. And so we're in the process of establishing kind of, I guess, round table, Zoom meets, where we literally just listen to them, listen to, what they want to learn from education, set up our own even community resolution networks, because we don't believe that the police can be reformed. So let's just work within ourselves, let's build it up from the bottom. So there's several things that are going on now, but yeah, to bottle it down, we're revolutionary, we're people of color, and we don't think that the state is going to provide what we need. So let's understand, and let's join our community. And I think what was really powerful, obviously I'm speaking from being in Norwich, which is, I grew up around Norwich, and it was very interesting. So I was involved with the first Norwich Black Lives Matter protest, and what was so interesting was just seeing Black and brown people out in force, and just being together. Because for me, Norwich, I believe, is 97, or Norfolk is 97% white. And so, you almost don't feel that community connection with, other Black and brown people, and you're very much living in an isolated bubble. And so I think it's so important to just build that unity amongst the people. And obviously, whilst I say we're revolutionary in the sense that we believe if we can establish this community foundation, and we can expand it from Norwich, from Bristol, wherever, if we can expand that and give power to the people, and then we can slowly rise up and just have power, and be liberated, emancipate ourselves. So yeah, that's kind of the foundations.
That was beautiful, thank you. And it's nice to have all three of you here from very different perspectives. Lisa, you're very fresh and energetic, and then obviously Amon's very well established, and then we have this beautiful international perspective from Jova, who's really being able to understand a lot of different groups. So thank you all for coming. I think Lisa kind of touched on this already a bit, but I was wondering why you felt the community approach was better than sort of trying to rally politicians, or why that distrust might be there. Amon, do you want to go first?
You're on mute.
Sorry, could you repeat that for me? I apologise.
I was basically, what is it that urged you to go through community, and why is your trust in community?
Okay, it's a good question. I think just in terms of how we were created, it was there was a problem that we didn't really believe any authority could rectify. It was problems within the community, so the community had to fix that problem. And so that's really where we've grown from. I mean, the education stuff that we do goes alongside, I guess, what they're learning in school. So we'll go in and do extra sessions that might be tailored specifically for whichever group it is that we're going to deal with. So, but yeah, I mean, I guess just on a general scale, it's just more a case of the best people to fix the problem for the community is the community. And so I don't really have the same necessarily situation as Lisa does there, but it's definitely community based. The community of the people that instruct us on what they need, and we do our best to try and provide that. So yeah, that's where we're at. That's official.
And what about you, Lisa? Because I think you're very much of a sort of like tear it to the ground and start again view, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, so I guess the reason why we think that, or we don't believe in the state, is because, you know, of what I said briefly, like, you know, the state runs on like hierarchies, and the system that we live in, specifically this capitalist structure that we live in, works on hierarchies. It works on inequality. And so, you know, that's the way that our world is running. That's the way that things are happening. You know, that's, you know, normality in our world. And so if we look at our country and at the order as, you know, a capitalist economy, and we look at the roots of that, and we look at how was this created or how was this expanded, and you know, you need to trace it back to history, and, you know, look at how, you know, slavery and colonialism literally are just intertwined with the rise of globalized capitalism. So if you acknowledge that, and you acknowledge that the state doesn't have our interests at heart, you know, their interests are interests of hierarchy, as I said, of inequality. And so, you know, for example, police reform, you know, there's been a lot of talk recently about, you know, Stephen Lawrence, and it's been, what, almost 30 years since his murder, and I think just over 20 years since the Macpherson report. And yeah, and since then, you know, we're talking about reform, and, you know, stop and search, for example, is now risen to more disproportionately affect Black people. And so, you know, we look at that, we look at education, you know, why still are we learning like from, you know, a white colonial perspective? We've been waiting for so long, and I think James Baldwin said, you know, how long can we wait? Like, we've been waiting a long time. And so I think, you know, I think there was a lot of people that were frustrated, and especially the people that gathered to be part of Black Community Rising were frustrated, and we saw that, you know, we have been waiting, and we saw that this is not a system that can be, you know, changed. And, you know, I guess it's the argument, I see the argument of, yeah, but what if a few Black people or a few people of color rise up into, like, you know, the top echelons of society, you know, surely that's great. And, you know, like, kudos to them, they've worked hard to, you know, beat this system that's against them. But at the same time, if a few people rise up, there's still that system which doesn't care about us, and there's still that massive embedded problem. And so I guess, yeah, pulling it back to the drawing board, like, you know, if we are to acknowledge this, if we are to acknowledge the root of the system is oppressive, and you know, the history of it, then you can't look at the state you know, for help. You can't look at the state, you know, to liberate us. You know, we need to do it ourselves, and within that, you know, we need to be working alongside our, you know, people of color community. We also need to be working alongside other movements. Yes, I think, you know, it's just important because, you know, what people of color face is a little bit different from what, I don't know, white working class people face, you know. So I think you need to build unity with your local space, and just, yeah, work together and give them what they have been denied from the state. And yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I went on quite a ramble, you know, but yeah.
I loved it. It was quite the ramble. So Jova, you're, like, with your work, it's less, is it community or is it through policy that you're working? But I guess as a creative, you're kind of choosing what medium you're using with your activism. How do you think, like, each are effective in their own ways?
I just, right, can you actually repeat the question, because I'm not sure I completely understood.
Yes. So what I'm asking basically is, like, when do you find, say you use your poetry for your activism, or you use your community to help you with your activism, or maybe through your music. What kind of benefits do you think there are in doing those forms of activism?
Okay, I mean, first of all, I mean, I'm an artist, and I do believe that art connects people. Art has always been a pavement for revolution. And I come from a line of Latin American artists, especially in Chile, because it comes back to that because for those of you who don't know, we had a dictatorship back in the 70s and 80s, and it was a dictatorship, a military dictatorship backed by the CIA. But before that time, Chile was having a revolutionary moment in history in which the arts thrived. So we had Pablo Neruda, who was a Nobel Literature Prize winner, who was a staunch communist, Victor Jara, who was a revolutionary musician who was murdered by the dictatorship for his messages, Violeta Parra, and others. So we had such a strong revolutionary culture in the arts that inspired a generation to rise up. And even during the dictatorship, those songs were censored, those poetic works were censored, but they kept inspiring people to fight back until finally the dictatorship was dissolved because of artistic inspiration and community action. I don't think, I'm a firm believer that everything is connected, not just spiritually, let's say, but physically. Everything is connected to everything else. So every problem that we have today can be traced back to capitalism, which can be traced back to colonialism, which can be traced back to patriarchy and oppression and anti-indigenism. My politics are very much, I try to learn from indigenous people because I do think they are the guardians of our land, especially in the Americas, but everywhere in the world. And they teach, I think we need to follow their example because they show us what communities can actually be like, or what they should be like. And what I have seen through not just through example, but by studying, is that strong communities make make bureaucracy obsolete and policing obsolete. So if we want to invest, I mean, not just invest in our communities, but work with our communities, we also have to work with the concept of autonomy. And something that was really eye-opening for me while still learning and going through my political process was that you don't actually have to ask for permission for anything. We are made to believe that you do. You have to go through so many channels and bureaucrats. You have to go through the council. You have to go through to your local representatives. You have to do this and do that. And these channels always take such a long time to go through. And more often than not, they will shut you down. You don't have to do it. You can just do things yourself. And I think people in America are starting to see that. People here are starting to see that when they tore down that statue of that slave owner in Brighton. I don't know, was it Bristol? One of the two. See, you don't need that. That's also community activism, and it's radical, it's revolutionary, but it's community. It's being with your brothers and sisters and siblings and working together. In Chile now, we're seeing that, and I think we saw it before almost anybody else, because for those of, well, okay, background context. Basically, we're having a right-winged, what's it called, a right-wing government. And we've had 30 years of both left-wing and right-wing governments that haven't really changed anything, even though we have a democracy now, but nothing's really changed since the dictatorship, except the facade of a democracy, and people just got really tired. People are starving, people don't have decent wages, and we decided to protest. The right-wing government started brutalizing us with police, militarized police, and we fought back. And it was a nationwide uprising. It's still happening to this day. even though it's not in the news anymore. And I think the people of Chile have now realized that, first of all, communities are extraordinarily important because we are all we can depend on. The state will not do anything for us. They have shown that time and time again, even with left-wing governments, they really don't do anything for us. And we've also realized, sorry, I'm just trying to keep my train of thought. We've also realized that that change is possible when you do it yourself. Chile has completely changed, and the arts are absolutely thriving under this change. I think, so going back to that connection, trying to, full circle, going back to that connection is that the arts cannot thrive without community, and community cannot thrive without arts. I think they're both extraordinarily interconnected, and the arts have to be free. So with music, for example, there's record labels usually act as the gatekeepers of music. However, they also kill our traditional folklore, through which we pass on stories and our struggles. And I think it's important to rescue that, and not just in a traditionalist way, but bringing it into the future and inspiring a new generation of our community members. So yeah, went on a bit of a lot of tangents, but I hope that answers your question.
No, they were all very beautiful. All of you have done wonderful tangents this whole time. I do just wonder, you've touched on a bit of like the similarities between the UK, but how would you find, does the attitude or approach differ much in the UK to back home?
Absolutely. I think it's starting to change now, but I've been in the UK for 5 years now. And the first thing I noticed in the UK was a general sense of apathy that doesn't really exist back home, because back home we don't have the luxury of being apathetic. Here, you do, and I think it's the same sense of apathy that I got when I was living in America. And I think it's a first world phenomenon. It's the intense colonization of the mind through neoliberalism and capitalism that just makes you both comfortable and complacent, and also brings you down and gives you a sense of hopelessness. I think that's starting to change now, especially in America, because of the Black Lives Matter movement and the huge uprisings in Portland and Louisville and Atlanta, which are absolutely incredible for me to see. But I think that's also starting to gain traction here, and people are starting to realize that we don't have to be complacent. We can do things on our own, and we don't have to wait for anyone to give us the green light to do so.
Thank you. So moving on to a slightly different topic, I was wondering what benefits, or maybe the highlight of your activism career through community activism, like what are some great results that you've seen from your work? Amon, if you wanted to go ahead with that one.
Okay. Oh wow. There's probably loads. They're probably more on a smaller scale, in the sense that we get to see young people every week, and just today getting A-level results, and you know the journey that they started on. You may have, the other day we had a message from somebody who said that we'd come to their school when they were 8 or 9, and I think they were 18 or something now, and they remembered us, and they mentioned the impact that was made. I think I go back to one example, which is the Oxford one I mentioned. I think it's just the idea that these young people felt that somebody was on their side, and I hadn't realized that there's lots of people around the country, for instance, or around the world, that don't feel heard, and we were able to offer at least to give them the chance to say what they wanted to say without fear of being reprimanded, or they've said something against someone. They told us, we put a report together, and we then told the school, so there's no personal names. It was just, these are the actions that are required. So we focus a lot on what young people want, and then try and deliver that, as opposed to imposing on them what we want and hoping that they'll go with it. So the success generally comes from, I don't know, we've done baking, for instance, during the lockdown for the NHS, and that was something that the young people really were quite keen on getting involved in. What else? We've done graffiti projects, feeding the homeless. Every Christmas we do a big Christmas dinner, and so we work alongside a homeless charity that we literally feed loads and loads of people. All our young volunteers come in and they'll offer their time. So yeah, that's just to name it. There's tons, but I'll go with those two just to keep it short. Nice, thank you.
Thank you.
Was that not a bit to your question? Sorry.
No, that was good. That was lots of
Yeah.
answers, very concisely.
Yeah. I can waffle, man, so don't, cut me off. You got the mute button, Ella. Just hit me.
Lisa, I know your endeavour's quite new, but I know being part of AIR, it's still also quite fresh. And I know every week I'm seeing these amazing people like build on ideas and like uplifting each other. So I know you've probably had like similar like glimmers of hope and excitement, if you'd want to share any of those.
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, it's just beautiful, like knowing other people like in your local area that want to do the same you. And like going back to what I said earlier, like for example, Norfolk is 97% white, and so it's very, when I grew up, although I grew up like outside of Norwich, but when I grew up, like I never saw anybody who looked like me, and it was very like isolating in that sense. So firstly, like just being in a space where one, like the people in like Black Community Rising, it's great that there's unity there, but also whilst working with the local community, like realizing how many people are kind of looking to or looking like forward in the same direction, but also just just being around people that share your experiences. But yeah, obviously like Black Community Rising is fairly new, and the things that we're launching, for example, as I said, like the education workshop, which we're starting next week in both locations. Like we haven't got full feedback from that, but we have got messages of people in the community who have said, I think it's just so important, and to be around other people in the community, and just to hear stories of our past. And we've had a lot of great reaction to what we're doing, in education, but also over our various other kind of mediums and streams and ideas. But hopefully, in the future, I can come back and report on all the great things that we've done and things that we've changed. But yeah, right now, we're very much filled with energy, and we've had great reaction so far, and we're just looking for a fruitful future, a radical future,
Yeah, we're definitely also looking forward to like being able to support you on your journey, and have that mutual support there. So yeah, everyone keep an eye out on our pages, and we'll keep shouting you out. Before I go to Jova, I just want everyone to know that we're going to open up for a Q&A after this. So get thinking, if you have any questions you want to ask, feel free to put them in the chat if you don't want to say them, or just when we get to that, we can unmute your mics. But yeah, Jova, what would you say is your highlight of your activism career with your communities?
I actually have two, and they're both they're both quite recent, and one is from Chile and one is from here. So the first one is, well, I went back to Chile for winter. I was lucky enough to be able to go back, and that was like smack dab in the middle of the uprising. And while I was there, while I didn't actually do much besides go to protests and help people out wherever I could, I see it as a highlight because it really just showed me what community could be. Because even though we were there on the streets being tear gassed, being shot with water cannons that had God knows how many chemicals in them, even though we were being brutalized by the police and rounded up and shot at, we were there helping each other out. Like strangers, no questions asked. Whoever needed assistance, we were there to help each other out. And that's like that true solidarity that I could see. Even when there weren't protests going on, there were community fairs and artists selling their merchandise or performing. Even neighborhood associations putting things together to help each other out, soup kitchens and things like that. And it was just such a beautiful example of what we could do. I mean, if we could do that under government repression, imagine what we could do without it. It was very inspiring for me. So that was a highlight. But the other one is this gig that I put on. No, actually, it was a gig that I put on for Chile, but here in Manchester, and it was called a peña. Peña is a traditional Chilean concert with like food and alcohol and coffee and things like that, so people can just sit, watch people perform. It's kind of open, so anyone can say anything they want. It's a very beautiful space, and I put that on here to raise money for people in Chile who needed medical supplies, who were being brutalized by the police. And so many people showed up. It was so beautiful. Like it seems like the entire Latino community in Manchester showed up. And it was very community oriented because not just for Chile, but here in Manchester, in Hume, because we did it at a local pub, one of the last truly independent local pubs we have here, called the Old Abbey Tap House, which is a great place. And they gave it to us for free because they wanted to support the cause. There was no fixed entry. It was just a donated fee, and we raised over £1,000. So it was just absolutely incredible to see that community support for people who weren't even from this country. So that was just, I don't know, it was beautiful for me. Yeah, beautiful to see.
Those are both very beautiful examples. Before I go to questions, I just want to prompt to all the speakers, if you have any PayPal links, GoFundMes, or any donation links you want to pop in the chat, if people are able to donate, please do. But yeah, so any questions from anyone? You can give a little wave or...
Be nice.
Okay, let's go Georgia. Georgia, then Sonia.
I have a question for you, Amon.
Oh gosh. Go on, sis.
Are you ready?
Yeah, go on, far away.
So I just wanted to speak more to your experience. So obviously, you've been in the business, let's say, for a long time. How have things kind of, in terms of like difficulties that you faced, how have things changed from when you first kind of established yourself? And does it get easier? And yeah, just how has it been over the years? And especially in longevity-wise, like keeping something running, keeping up momentum. How's that been? Sorry, not the most concise question.
No, that's fine. I think I can answer that. I think I don't want to take any praise for being, like, I'm relatively new. So let me just explain that I've been around the organisation for years. I do graffiti and I've done workshops and what have you with a lot of our young people. In terms of the role I'm in now, I've been doing that for about a year. So I do have good knowledge of what we do. But in terms of, I think a lot of the things come from the problems that we faced. Probably difficulty with people, because we're an organisation that goes out to people. So, you know, necessarily someone might want our services, might not have the money for the services. We go based on, say a school will request us to come in and we'll go and do maybe a 6-week project. It could run all term, whatever it might be. They have to maybe get funding, or we'll try and offer it at the cheapest rate that we possibly can. So I think certainly over the years, sometimes things like funding, that can potentially get you in a position where you think the service is needed, but you know, where's the money going to come from? I think in terms of how we generate money has got better over the years. What was your question again? I got bits of it.
It was kind of of a two-part question, but I went off on a bit of a tangent myself.
It's all good.
But the second thing was just like momentum. How do you keep momentum going? How do you keep people's spirits up?
I'm going to say this.
Tough work, it's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Rosa, who's listening, and both Rob as well, that we've got a team that really is enthusiastic. I think it's like one of those jobs. I guess you wouldn't be a teacher if you didn't like young people or children. It's not glamorous. You're not doing it for the money. You do it because you purely love what you do. And I've found in the organisation that I work for that my colleagues are as motivated. And, you know, it's not unusual for someone to do an 18-hour day. No one would ever know that. It just, you know, they arrive and something's already set up, or, you know, there's an event and it just looks like it just happened, you know, osmosis, where someone's there behind it, promoting it. And I think our desire to see young people in a better position than they might possibly be in is what keeps us going every day. I don't recall any point where something's needed to be done and we've all gone, oh, it's just, that's what needs to be done, and everyone gets on and does it. And so, yeah, I think that's the thing that's kept us going, is there's no end. We're just going to do this until maybe we end. So that's the motivation. There's no, I don't know. I think that's what I would say. Oh goodness, yeah, that's Rob. This guy here, I mean, he's been doing it 16 years, and you know, even the landscape of Slough, the demographic of who we actually serve has changed as well. So like I was saying, initially it was born out of the conflicts amongst young Asian people, and within that now, Slough is very, very multicultural. Does anyone know where Slough is? Anyone been to the Slough? Yeah, okay. I'm in Windsor, so understand, Lisa, I feel your pain. I'm in like in another world. Luckily Slough's just down the road, and it's very mixed and very multicultural, but I think it's one of those things where young people are young people, regardless what era we're talking about. So the problems that young people faced 22 years ago, they still face today. And I guess to a degree, it's altered with the introduction of the internet and social media and what have you. So it's no longer fighting necessarily on the street. That does happen, but it's more like trying to deal with people from a mental perspective, trying to get into their minds and try and offer a change that they can be the change. What else did I want to mention? There's loads of things. Every time everyone's speaking, I'm like, oh yeah, I've got to say that. And now it's my time to speak. I've totally forgotten, but maybe I'll be able to come back to it in the next questions. Thank you.
My question was for you, actually.
Oh, for goodness sake. Yeah, go on, hit me.
Mine's, it's fairly personal. I actually sort of grew up in Slough.
Wow.
Yeah, I went to Lee Infant School. I don't know.
Oh my, so did I. You wouldn't believe it, but go on.
Yeah, and I just wanted to know, because I was just loving you here to talk about it, because the one thing I always note about growing up there was that I didn't notice, as my dad would say, like it was rough.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that growing up, because there was always such a big sense of community, and I loved the fact that it was, even though you say it's gotten more multicultural, which is great, it was so diverse even then, and that was back in the early 2000s.
Sure.
And I think that's one of the things that hit me moving to Brighton. Okay. I ended up going to a junior school where I was the only black person in my year.
Yeah.
And that came with its own problems. So I just wanted to know how the community has grown, because I still have family and friends that live there, and they say that there's numerous community outreach projects.
Oh, absolutely.
And that there's been a serious upheaval, not so much from the government and the council, but from within the various communities.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to know, in terms of not just school stats, police stats, but also just are there any like good community events or anything that happen?
There are. There's lots. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, there's obviously there's us, and we're a part of a group called Yes, which is Youth Engagement Slough. So within that, you've got Resource Productions, and they're a community group as well that make films, and they do apprenticeships in fact, one of the colleagues, I think she got a commendation. I don't think she got an OBE. It might have been an OBE, something like that. She got recognised. Yes, Rob's put the link in the comments. Then, you know, we've got Empowered, there's dance groups, we work with the Roma community. So within Slough, it seems to be a good place to come to because there's work. It's 20 minutes on the train from central London. So Slough is growing, it's developing. People can commute really easily. It's close to loads of motorways. So yeah, we do youth work with the Roma community. I can't think, there's loads of groups, absolutely loads. I'll put some in the chat. That might be easier than me trying to bluff my way through it. But what was your question about just how things have changed?
Just to give an example of the effects of community outreach projects on a community as a whole. So I think in terms of like how you're saying there's not so much fights on the street, yeah, those sorts of things, both in terms of statistics, but also just sense of a community.
Yeah, just from I don't have any statistics in that sense, but just from my own observations, I think it's interesting to see, because I think once upon a time you had our Asian communities, and then maybe our Black Caribbean community. We've got a lot of people from Anguilla in Slough. And then over the years, I've seen a lot of people from Zimbabwe. I'm from Ghana. There just seems to be Kenya. And then you've got Poland. Okay, there you go. Then you've got, we've got a lot of Poles in Slough. So we've got a very big Eastern European community. So somehow we've all got to work together. And I mean, just from going into schools, you can see how mixed it is. I mean, I went to school in Windsor, so I was the only Black kid in my school. It wasn't a problem for me. I kind of, it wasn't an issue. I didn't suffer the overt racism that a lot of people I know did. And it's interesting when you go to schools to see that within a class, you could have a child who's half Zimbabwean, half Slovakian, or that there's Polish and Jamaican. And that's something that I think is relatively new, in the sense that the diversity within the school system is huge. So we do a thing where we will go in and we'll do a timeline maybe of the influx of Slough, of people coming to Slough and the reasons. So we'll go out and do maybe an audio record of people's journeys into Slough, and it's really amazing. So come back, that's all I'm saying. Brighton's lovely, but I'll need you.
I haven't been in a while.
Come down, come look for us. Yeah.
All I remember is Queensmere.
Yeah. Funny enough, that's all going to be redeveloped relatively soon. We've been on a panel to they consulted our young people, which was amazing, on what they required to have. I think one thing I've noticed a lot is there's a lot of people that once upon a time would have imposed a lot of things on people. But I've seen of late that a lot more consultations, and whether they listened, different matter, but there seems to be a lot of organizations that are trying to consult and try and serve the community rather than just impose stuff. And that's what we've been doing forever, but it's nice to see that, because I think when I talk to young people, yeah, hold on. So Rob's talking to you, Sonia. Yeah, it's just that idea that it's going to work better if people get things that they actually require, as opposed to, I don't know, just building a new shopping centre that no one shops in. So with the consultation, they established that shops aren't necessarily the thing you need on a high street nowadays. So a lot of big businesses are going out. They're just closing down, and I think they're going to be changing the layout to accommodate more things like coffee shops and housing, as opposed to just having your run-of-the-mill shops. Anyway, I'll stop there. I hope I've answered your questions, both of you. I hope that was sufficient. Okay. Whew, verbal diarrhea.
Questions? Hi, Brenna. Go ahead.
Hi. I think this is a question for Lisa, but can be kind of for everyone. I was just thinking, obviously, like, we're living in like quite a divided, polarized nation at the moment. And I was just thinking about how can community, well, we're living in a divided, polarized nation due to like the people in power wanting that, and the news kind of promoting that too. But just thinking about how can like community organizations like yours, well, yeah, Black Community Rising, how can they also unite? Or is there an aim to unite, or is it overthrow? But then again, as I say, yeah, if we're living in a very like divided, polarized situation where it is maybe half and half, you know, then I guess I'm thinking about revolutions as well. They say, do you think it is, what do they say, what's that quote? It's like, it's the few that make the change. Is it something like that about revolutions? So it's always like a small few that make the change. So is that more relevant, or is it also more really important that as a community organization group, you're kind of somehow working to like educate people from another side? Or, but also, yeah, the people in power obviously have the money, so yeah.
Yeah, hi Brenna, thanks for your question. Yeah, so basically in terms of like unifying, like, yeah, to have like the end goal obviously is revolution, and in order to do that you need you know, the people to be on board. You need the oppressed people to be on board. And you know, we are a community group, well, we are a POC community group, so you know, we're made up of people of color, but that doesn't mean we're just serving like people of color. And we've talked about this, about like the need to make alliances with other groups, with, you know, white working class movements, with you know, movements like other oppressed movements, you know, LGBT, IQA plus movements, you know, with radical feminist movements. Obviously, like we are trying to like encapsulate everything there, like within Black Community Rising. Like, as I said, we're trying to tear down all oppressive systems, but we, you know, we realized that we need to unite with other groups to do that. And yeah, of course, like the powers that be are always going to be against us in that sense, because, you know, the system is working for them, and you know what they want, which is, you know, power, you know, whether that be economic or social or political power, you know, they have that. And as I said, like, capitalism is based on inequality, so why would they want the system to change? But you know, it just goes back down to this thing, and that I think Jova said it, like, you know, you can't expect the system to you know, help you out. You need, like, there's power within people, and we need to acknowledge that if we do believe in something and we do have, you know, a mass movement of something, then we can start our own initiatives and, you know, slowly overtake. Because, for example, with Black Community Rising, you know, as I said, we've got an education workshop, but we're also doing community resolution networks to replace the police, as I said, and we also have plans to have like food programs, which is kind of intertwined with our education program as well. And so we have all of these things that are happening, and obviously we need to work with other groups to execute these things well. But once the community realizes that these groups are being more efficient than the government, and I think, you know, right now in quarantine, it was a really interesting time, especially for radical leftists and you know, anarchists and all of this, because there was a rise of like mutual aid groups, which, you know, you could argue that they got taken over by, you know, certain people who had certain you know, beliefs or whatever. But you know, this rise of mutual aid groups within quarantine, where communities got together and they said, okay, we need to help each other out. Like, this person cannot even make it to the supermarket, let's go and, you know, deliver food for them. Let's help them out in this way and that way. Let's help our vulnerable people as work within the community, because the government isn't providing. What are they doing? And like, for me, who, you know, has, you know, I guess anarchist ideologies, that was amazing. Like, you know, if people can see, because obviously people there on a mass scale, everybody that participated in these groups saw that, yes, we can't rely on the government. We need the power of ourselves. So the idea is, when we have these community initiatives and when we bring them up, people will realize, and that's when, you know, their consciousness will develop through that, You know, even, you know, direct education, like I said, we're doing is important, because you can't tell somebody, you know, you're being oppressed. You need, that person needs consciousness that they're being oppressed. You know, you can't force people to do something, because, you know, I think somebody said it earlier, like the system that we live in is comfortable. Like, people are sedated with consumerism. They're sedated with complaining about, you know, immigrants, and, you know, just living in their world. They're sedated with feeling like they do belong with, you know, the upper classes, or they do belong to the UK, which is a very divided nation. And whilst you sedate these people through the media and all of this, they feel like a unity to that. So when you tell people that there is an opposite, and you do that in practice, and people realize that, you know, this is working for me, then that's when you can look at things like revolution. Because, you know, you tell somebody, you know, I want a revolution, we're a radical group, we want a revolution. That's abstract. Like, people can't even imagine that revolution. What? Like, this is capitalism. Like, I'm comfortable in my capitalism. You know, you want to change things around, you want to like disrupt my world. And so you have to give people tangible examples and realistic experiences, so that they can see for themselves that, you know, this actually works. Yeah.
If I could also build on that, if you don't mind, because that was beautifully said, and I love everything that you just said. Like, it's absolutely that, because you have to keep in mind that all of every single bit of systematic and institutionalized prejudice, let's say, is there to divide and conquer. Racism exists to divide the working class white man from the working class black man, and etc. It's there to divide people who would otherwise band together and overthrow their oppressors. But you can't combat that by teaching people political theory, because it's not for everybody. You can't combat that by campaigning for like the Labour Party. Jeremy Corbyn did that and lost the election because he didn't do community organization, which he should have done. I mean, it was part of the reason, but still. And so what do you do to show people that actually racism doesn't benefit you like you thought it did? And immigrants actually aren't the bane of your existence. They have it worse than you. You do community organization and action, and you help them out and show them that there's another way of doing things. You give them tangible alternatives, and then they begin to see things from your perspective. Because I think a lot of working class white people live in rundown communities, and read the Daily Mail or the Sun, and really get into their heads and believe the rhetoric that immigrants and Muslims and Black people are at fault for their problems. If you organize their communities and show them that they can fix their own problems, and that actually these people that they demonized are helping them out when their politicians and their rich bosses and everybody don't give a, can I curse? Don't give a about them. Okay, don't give a shit about them yet. Then they begin to realize that actually we're all the same. We're on your side. There's actually nothing differentiating us except the color of our skin or where we come from. And why then did we believe that? And they begin to think about it a little bit more in depth. So yeah, I absolutely agree with what Lisa's saying. Like, actions speak louder than words, basically.
So we'll take another question if anyone has one. Wave at me if you do. I'm looking through, or if your camera's Dan. Go ahead, Dan.
Hello. Hi, guys. Basically, I think my question's kind of for everyone, but kind of off the back of that, I kind of wanted to ask, like how much time would you guys say should be spent kind of trying to, I guess, like bring people to our side, like convince people, all this stuff? Like, I mean, I mean, I've got my own kind of opinion on it, and like, but I kind of wanted to kind of know what you thought in terms of, because obviously it's actions speak louder than words. I totally agree with that. But like, I feel like a lot of energy, you know, just among like just the general discourse is like trying to convince people why, you know, like there's a lot of like trying to explain what Black Lives Matter means. There's trying to explain like all this stuff. And I feel like, I personally feel like it's a waste of time, because it's not a hard concept to really grasp. And if people wanted to understand it, they would. And I think it's kind of, we should be, I mean, I think we should be kind of spending more of our time like doing what we're doing, you know, like focusing on like the communities and the people who need it. And, you know, people will tag along if they want to, like, but I don't know, what do you guys kind of think about just the amount of time being spent in regards to, or the importance of trying to get people on the side of liberation and the movement in general? I don't know whoever wants to go first. Yeah.
I'll go then, if you don't mind.
There you go, Trevor. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Did you want to go?
No, go on. Please do. Please go ahead.
Okay. I think that's a question that I don't think has a solid answer, because it really depends on the context. However, I think as a marginalized person, you know when someone's asking you a question in good faith and when someone's trying to waste your time and tire you out. So I mean, you know that like those kinds of mean-spirited questions are a waste of time. You shouldn't have to answer them. It's you know, when people are like, but don't all lives matter? Like, why don't like Black people talk about Black on Black crime? It's bullshit. They know it's bullshit. They don't actually want an answer out of you. They just want to tire you out. So I don't think that that's worth your time or your energy, because burnout is very, very real in any form of activism, and you have to take care of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
However, that being said, I think a lot of people have okay, let's start from the assumption that people are indoctrinated. We are born into and grow up in a racist society that's also homophobic, misogynistic, ableist, etc. And we have to fight to unlearn everything that we were indoctrinated with. Some people are further along on that journey than others. I know that if you talked to me 10 years ago why Black Lives Matter, I probably wouldn't have even given you the time of day, because I wasn't there yet. My mentality, like I still had a lot of things to unlearn. So, but if there's somebody that you think is getting there, then I do think it's worth talking to them and educating them, because the fact of the matter is the opposition, which is the white nationalism and fascism, is actively trying to recruit people, and they're doing a really good job of it, and that's scary. So we have to be doing our part too to recruit people to our side. However that may be. I still think that actions speak louder than words, and that you can convince more people by doing rather than saying. I think that's the biggest fault with leftism in the 21st century, and I think people are starting to realize that. The people who want to listen to you will listen to you, and I think you'll realize that as you talk to them.
I like that. I don't really know what to add to that. Both have said amazing things. I think one thing that in my experience is, if you build something, people will come, but they need to be able to see it. And like both Jova and Lisa said, you're trying to tell someone that something's bad and they don't believe that it's bad because they're all right in it. And so I think the method that I've used over the years is just simply just by example, is not trying to convince anybody necessarily. I think definitely with the Black Lives Matter, when just after George Floyd's passing, I got all the calls from everyone who knew me, wanted to talk to me for some reason. And I did have burnout. I had ex-friends, I say ex-friends, you know, the Facebook group of people that we went to school together 30 odd years ago. We're not friends, but they're still part of my Facebook, and they were coming to me asking questions and saying all lives matter. And I realized I'd spent so much time trying to convince someone who had no interest in actually hearing that, yeah, it got me down to the point where I literally shut myself off, couldn't watch the news anymore. And then over time, I've got myself back to a position where I feel like I don't necessarily need to convince anybody. I think, particularly what Jova said, there's levels of consciousness and not everyone is at that place. And so trying to convince someone to change when they don't feel they need to is almost pointless. But if they see that there's something that's better than, if you're offering an alternative that's either better or on par with what they've already got, I think more people are likely to come and join you. I mean, we as an organization, it's difficult because we're not necessarily political in that sense. We try and affect change by affecting the individuals that we come into contact with. And so that's basically the start and end of what we do. But having said that, we deal with youth offenders, we have youth parliament. So we've got children that they sit on councils and actually try and affect policy change. They travel around the world to try and go and meet other young people that are doing the same thing. So there's aspects of it, but I think in terms of, I wanted to speak to Lisa actually, because your organization, I don't know if I've answered anything, doesn't matter, I'm just talking, but is your organization centered in Norwich, or is it going to be a national movement, worldwide movement? Is that the plan?
So Dan, who actually just asked that question, is actually part of Black Community Rising. So he's based in Bristol.
Okay.
So at the moment it's Norwich and Bristol, but you know, we're looking to expand. We have a few people in our group that are from like London, but we haven't really like established ourselves there at the moment. So you know, we're just trying to spread the message around, like, and just cover as much of the UK, maybe even branch out more than that. It depends. Like right now, we're just trying to see who else is kind of interested in our message and just go from there, make ourselves known. But the goal is expansion.
Okay, good. I'm just thinking, like, in this time where we're all sat at home on computers looking at screens, it's probably the best time, I think, to get stuff out there and try and recruit people that way. But I hope is it Brenna? Where's she gone? Oh yeah. I hope I've answered your question to a degree, because these guys did an amazing job. So yeah. There was a question, Isadora, she wrote in the...
There was a question from Isadora, but I think you touched on that. So I'm just going to move to so Isadora asked about trying to get the message outside of your echo chamber. So we've spoken a bit about recruiting. So I'm going to go on to the last question, which is Kane.
Oh, good. Okay.
Okay.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I was good. I was I am kind of responding to the invocation of the kind of community engagement during the lockdown, as Lisa mentioned, which I think is an incredibly important and interesting point to reflect on. I think that's being contrasted with people's inability or unwillingness to, you know, wear masks, observe social distancing, and, you know, protect the most vulnerable, and, you know, enact any kind of personal change that can make life easier for those who are most at risk, and you know, for those who not having a steady income because of a second lockdown wouldn't be, you know, those would be hit the worst. How do we make that action at the initial stage not just a response to an unprecedented action or event, and part of the quote unquote new normal? How do we make you know, the equilibrium at the end of this awful film better than it was at the start?
It's a good question. I think everyone's eyes have been opened by the fact that, I know all of us would say we've seen police brutality for years. It's not a surprise, but I think for it to be plastered on our screens, and it's opened up that conversation of people that would easily have dismissed it as it's not as rampant as we are aware it is. So I don't know. I think, what was your question, boss? Sorry, I don't know where it's gone. Oh, sorry, Kane.
I'm here.
Yeah.
But basically, it was that I agree that a set of norms were kind of disrupted during the beginning of lockdown, and I'm basically asking how we make those norms part of the quote unquote new normal. In terms of community, sharing, and these kind of principles that would be necessary to in the kind of world we want to see post lockdown. How do we get get away from the kind of atomized individual and start a kind of promote? How do we continue to promote kind of socialist humanist norms when there isn't a kind of direct requirement to do so?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I would say obviously, we've all heard the phrase that let's make this a movement and not a moment, and you can apply that as well to right now, because we're in such like different circumstances from our status quo, like engagement in anti-racism, and as I mentioned earlier, engagement with mutual aid is because it's a different setting, perhaps it's been easier. So I don't know, there's kind of a fear that people are just going to go back to normal, whatever normal is. But I think from like a revolutionary perspective, I think what this quarantine is showing us is kind of like the inefficiency of our current order. One, because of in economic terms, and we're about to go into a massive recession. Yeah. Because our economy is based on us going out and spending, and we're not doing that. There's a massive fork in the economy. But two, I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, two, just in the sense that, yeah, as you said, like racism is literally at our doorstep. Like, well, it's even closer than that. It's on our phones, it's on our TVs. And so everything's so in our face right now. We're in like this hyper, like realistic or hyper world where everything is just right at our kind of the world's problems are just right in front of our eyes. So obviously, like, I don't know, it's a difficult question. Like, obviously we need to kind of use this time to highlight and to show people and try and educate people like on why this system is not working in this time. Like, we need to be very energetic in that. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have an extremely clear answer to that. I think we should use this time to take initiative and show people this isn't working. But at the end of the day, people, we live in a capitalist society, and once things are open, we saw the queues outside Primark, when they first opened. We saw that people were just trying to rush back into that life, which isn't necessarily a life that's benefiting them. It's not necessarily a life that's like structurally helping them. So I think perhaps the answer is just continuously spreading this message, and not leaving it, like, as activists ourselves and as people who are trying to start a movement, just keep on working with the community. And yeah, I'm not sure.
Sorry, just to interject and kind of I guess kind of maybe restate the question to make it a more answer. I think, or to make it to make its necessity clear. I think that in terms of talking about current systems, the old neoliberal saying of never let a good crisis go to waste, I think is what we're kind of fighting against in terms of historically 2008 financial crisis, and there was post that Obama chose to not regulate regulate the economy in any kind of way. But to actually enact a set of processes that would perpetuate the what caused it. And so I'm basically asking, how do we avoid that in some kind of tangible way? And I think that example of 2008 demonstrates how it needs to go beyond the established means of dissemination of a message.
I'd say like, again, there's no real solid answer to it because this is, for the most part, uncharted territory. So it is a community effort to find the answer to that. But I do think it's the way to do it is to start strengthening your community, start building up your resources so that when the government inevitably tells you to go back to work, to go back to normality, a normality that is unsustainable and that is violent to most of us, we have some means of resisting. So what does that look like? For example, community gardens are extremely important because they lessen the need to go to supermarkets to buy really expensive food that is more often than not very low quality and unhealthy. And instead, you can feed your community from that. And maybe you won't be able to completely feed yourselves without relying on any outside resources, but it will at least give you an edge. Eviction funds, because a lot of people are getting evicted because they don't have work. And tenants associations, even if you want to form unions, tenants unions, or just working unions as well, that works too. There's no one way of doing it, but I think if you talk to your community or the people around you, and maybe the community isn't necessarily the people that are physically around you, but your group of friends, and the people that you associate with, you can work on building those resources and, getting ready for the inevitable return to normality, which the government is already trying to impose, unsuccessfully, to surprise of nobody. But I think it's that, because revolution, again, well, I don't know if it's actually been said, but revolution is not a thing that just happens, it's a process. And you have to build it from day one. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, sorry. Oh, stop, Ellis. You talk. Sorry.
Okay, I'll give you 2 minutes.
I thought about what you were asking. I don't know if I answered correctly, but it was just more. I kind of feel like there's lots of people who have now been exposed to things that they hadn't been prior to, say, the lockdown, and there's an element of, I think the things that work in communities will continue to work, and people will reject the stuff that doesn't. So I kind of feel like there's an element of consciousness that people may have now gone into, and I'd like to think that they would continue to try and pursue change. I've seen allies come from all over the place. I walked past a house in Eton, and it had a sign on the window saying Black Lives Matter, we stand with you. And it really stayed with me that that person's put themselves out there. I don't even have one on my own window. But I'm assuming that person isn't Black, and I'm assuming that they put that on their window, and they now have put themselves as a target. And I think we found a lot of allies that we may not have known that were there. And so the future, I'd like to think, is going to be hard but optimistic. I think, like we're talking about revolution, it has to start, and the ball has been rolling. I think this last 3, 4, 5 months, if it was rolling before, it's gained momentum, and if it wasn't rolling, it's just started. And I think we might not see what the benefits or the benefits of this time period, maybe not for a few months or a few years, but I'm optimistic. Children, young people that, I didn't think were necessarily switched on, are far more switched on than I ever gave them credit for. And I think that those seeds have been planted, and now our job now is to keep watering those seeds and see what comes from that. Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for contributing tonight. It's been really, really, really interesting. Yeah, and as far as AIR goes, we are becoming more and more of a community, and we want to open up that community to as many people as possible and allow them to contribute what they want to. So coming up, there will be more volunteering opportunities if that's something of interest to you. But outside of that, even just your feedback is incredibly useful for all of us. To pass on to you, Ella.
Yeah, well, you said it already, but yeah, anyone who's kind of like wants to join us on this journey, and well, I think the amazing thing that we've kind of learned from like so many of the events so far is that we've met so many people from really like amazing groups, including all three of you panelists tonight as well, who like I hope that like by us all coming together at different events, not just air events but other events as well, like does feel like we are, I don't know, we have a lot of power and strength and we really can, like, I think, come together at this time especially, that and create change. And anyway, yeah, but thanks so much for I genuinely was like really inspired and really touched by what all three of you had to say today, and we've got like an Angry Mob group chat and it's been popping off just saying that, like, how much we love all of you guys. So yeah, thanks. And yeah, I guess anyone who doesn't already, just give us like a follow on social media, and then also because we'll try and put out some resources from the panelists and everything else that came up in the chat today. So yeah, and yeah, thanks so much everyone, and have a nice evening for what's left of it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pleasure. All right, I hope to speak to you guys again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care. See you later.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.